Okay. Next item then. Yay.
Bring that light picture drawing to consent.
Yeah. Oh, God, look at all the stuff to carry.
Well, people don't understand when you talk sometimes. Try to have some visual aids.
Yeah, no, I know what how big an element is.
And
do understand Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Historic Landmarks Commissioners. Betty Weiss, City Planner. I was here on somewhat of an impromptu basis a couple of weeks ago, and you all are in the process of reflecting back on a number of important goals and work programs that have been underway for years now related to surveys, designations, historic districts, guideline updates, and when I touched base and saw what the discussion was about, I wanted to come down and be part of it. So I dropped in and said that I think that kind of process is really great. You know, you stay on track with some goals, and then you take a time out and you look and you see what you've accomplished, which is really quite a bit, and then you're setting a new work program and goals to move forward. So in light of the fact that the Historic Landmarks Commission, the work you do, is really important to the overall city general plan and policy context, and because we're going through a major general plan update, I wanted to engage a little more directly with Historic Landmarks Commission in terms of the Plan Santa Barbara process. So it was suggested that I come down and give you a status report of things going on, what to expect coming up with regard to the Plan Santa Barbara General Plan update, and then also, as best I can, think about input into your goal setting and workload priorities in light of not just the policy work we're doing, but constrained financial resources and budget issues as well. So that's why I'm here. Sound right in terms of what we're discussing today? Okay, so I did bring for your information kind of the state of our general plan as it exists today, which is documents that some were developed concurrently and have a lot of internal consistency and reference. Then some of the city's general plan elements were significantly updated without regard to the remaining elements, and it's somewhat of a mishmash. It's not just a matter of word processing, you know, putting the same color cover of the document that we're talking about. We're talking about a significant effort to really evaluate the general plan, that some portions go back to the original 1964 planning efforts, to more recent regularly updated housing elements, the circulation element, and so forth. So this is a vision of where we're going, although it would also be electronically accessible with a lot of really great maps and charts and information that would hopefully come across well in terms of the paper, but online even greater ability for the community, the boards and commissions who implement this policy to have an understanding of what the general plan is about. So the idea is to make one comprehensive document where we would be having one introduction to the entirety of the general plan. Instead of, if you look through the housing element, there's a great introduction in the housing element on planning history. And it really is planning history that has shaped not only our housing policy, but a lot of policy throughout the general plan and what we all do. Likewise, when the circulation element was updated, because it was just the circulation element, and we weren't at the same time updating the land use element, there's a whole section in the circulation element about land use that really belongs in the land use element. So this is what we have to work with. Some of these are just somewhat mechanical issues, and if you read and understand the policy, we can easily give meaning to it in what we do. It's just, it's not that easy. Sometimes, given the random nature of our current general plan, it could lend itself to late discovery of conflicts, overlooking important goals or policies. And so this process that we're undertaking with Plan Santa Barbara, we call it Plan Santa Barbara, although sometimes people want to say, well, really, isn't that a general plan update? And one of the reasons why we were a little resistant to using the term general plan update is because, as I mentioned last time, the primary focus of Plan Santa Barbara is to update the housing element and the land use element. And we are creating a structure for the entirety of the general plan, but we aren't, at the onset anyway, our intention wasn't to say it's all being done at once or exactly how the subsequent phases would be handled. When the city has, in the past years while we have been undertaking Plan Santa Barbara, we did, however, engage the community in broad discussions, and people care a lot about this community, and everything is so interrelated that we heard from a lot of people about a lot of environmental concerns also, physical environmental concerns, natural and the built environment, and again, public safety and public infrastructure. A lot of issues came up. And so I have something for each of you. It's just, I copied some of the information from the Plan Santa Barbara process to date. What this is an excerpt from the policy direction that the City Council gave in January. And this policy direction, I've only made you copies of a couple of pages, but as I've said, we heard from the community in many different areas. So we have within Plan Santa Barbara goals, objectives, policies, and suggestions for implementation that cover several different areas. So the first page in the attachment, the diagram here is pretty much what I just showed you. Is taking our current state of the general plan with these elements as they're defined and moving into a different format for the general plan. And in doing that, one of the things...
I just need to turn it
Oh,
around.
turn it around. Okay. In doing that, we did identify a new element for the general plan, historic resources and community design. And throughout the process, as that evolved, we've termed it as a new element, including those both areas. And that didn't settle with everyone in the community. At the Planning Commission, as they were wrapping up their recommendation, that was felt to be appropriate as a combination element. When it went to City Council, it was discussed briefly, but it's one of those issues that has popped up from time to time. So I think the last time I was here, I mentioned we could see this evolving into a distinct element if that is really, what's needed. I do think that the policy discussion regarding community design is also important and needs to find its proper place in our new general plan as well. And that's why the idea was initially that that could be combined together. Right now, the The primary location for general plan policy discussion regarding historic and cultural resources is in our conservation element. And so I'll point that out again when we talk about moving forward into the new element, because this would be a source document for that work. So anyway, the next diagram is one that shows what we heard from the community and what the course that the council set us on. It just graphically depicts a system that keeps the general plan alive and responsive to the community interests. So, of course, there's this comprehensive introduction with a sustainability framework, and that is something that the City Council issued as very early direction. So, well, what does sustainability mean for Santa Barbara? The next section is a two-way arrow. We believe that sustainability for Santa Barbara is defined quite a bit by these, what we call policy drivers: growth management, economics and fiscal health, energy and climate change, historic and community character, and public health. And then from that policy umbrella, you develop a general plan. And so those are the elements of the general plan. And then a critical part of this Plan Santa Barbara process, which is really unique, is see this arrow that wraps up back around and loops the system? You'll see the bubble that says an adaptive management and community indicators process, as well as continued public involvement, is a new concept that has been incorporated into our Plan Santa Barbara process, primarily based on initial thoughts from Commissioner John Jostis, but really one that resonated with a lot of people. If you're a systems analyst in any way, looking at a diagram like this, you know how important a feedback loop is, and again, to keep things relevant. And so we've been developing that new program, and it's very exciting. The staff presented the draft outline of the program and a number of sample indicators to the Planning Commission a couple of months ago, and they were quite pleased with that. So that would be something, again, just like you all were doing in evaluating your goals and reassessing where to move forward. That's the same kind of thing. So next, the couple pages that I provided are the section as it's been reviewed to date by the Council for the Historic Resources and Community Design. So there's just an excerpt here. And if you have been to the Plan Santa Barbara website, you can see that there's a lot of other supporting materials. And of course, this entire document in color and everything is available on the website. So what are we doing right now is we are taking this policy direction and these two documents and creating new drafts. Again, the output of the Plan Santa Barbara process for this phase that we're in right now is drafts and adoption of the land use element and the housing element, as well as an update to our land use map. The land use map is a critical companion to the land use element, and then, as you all know, sorry, I'll tape it. I have one on my wall too that doesn't get carried around like this. This is a companion to the land use element, and then also implemented through zoning. So you see the projects proposing office or retail or condominiums, based on all these land use tools. This one was signed by Sheila Lodge when she was the mayor. So clearly in need of updating. The city has amended the general plan land use map a number of times, but we have not updated the actual physical map because this was prepared under a different form, and now we're going into the whole GIS and everything like that. So what I wanted to suggest to the Commission is the work that we're doing right now in drafting these elements, as well as preparing a draft environmental impact report. we're actually going to all, not all, but primary boards and commissions who have participated in Plan Santa Barbara to date, and then again, like I say, the folks that make this policy meaningful and alive, and asking that you all participate in this upcoming release of draft documents and a review and, continuing to shape the policy direction for the general plan update. So what we're expecting is middle of February towards late February, we will be holding an open house where we're releasing the draft DIR, the draft land use element, the draft housing element, and the map. And we're doing it with an open house format so that staff can help orient people to the documents and have other information to start up an official 45-day review period that will bring the community, staff, boards and commission representatives to the Planning Commission for draft hearing review. And the Planning Commission, these hearings are to hear the comments and again, think about moving forward. Okay, with all this input, where is this what direction are we going in terms of the drafts? Are they in need of significant adjustment? Does the information we're learning in the EIR need to be incorporated some way into the work we're doing? We know the answer to that is yes. So it's a critical step in the process, and my suggestion, again, that I'll be making to other boards and commissions too, is we'll be providing each of you with a disc as well as one hard copy printed volume of the documents that we'll be releasing, and just suggesting how you want to review that, maybe appointing a 2 or 3 member subcommittee to, if you want to be bringing comments back for commission endorsement, if you want to come and participate as individuals, whatever ends up being something that you can do, that's what we're hoping to solicit and support in that next process. So that's the whole Plan Santa Barbara status. So that before we talk about the historic resources element, do you want to just pause on this part of it for any questions or discussion?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay. Well, I do think as you dig into this effort, the sustainability framework, as well as the land use and housing, it's all interrelated, as those diagrams show. If this group, I believe, focused solely on the historic element, we wouldn't get as great a value out of what we're doing as a whole. So I really hope that you all can participate in the whole as well. Okay, so our work program, as we understand it right now, is all of those things I just described. And I don't really have scheduled when we're going to work on the historic resources element. And so you all said, but we have a lot of energy behind this. What can you do to support and foster this important element of the general plan moving forward? So I just wanted you to know that the basic pieces are all available to you. I know there's an interested public, and there's interest on this commission, and you could, to a certain degree, work independently for a time, I think, pulling this element together so that it becomes a draft of its own. I just, again, want to urge that I think it needs to fit and be compatible and with the overall process, and that type of planning process really does require some level of city resource support. And I think it's important that we support your goals and all this. And Jaime and I were discussing, and I think it was part of what you were talking about last time, we're trying to make some real headway with historic districts, which is the conservation element, goals and policies, and they've been on the books for a long time, and you're doing some good work. We were learning as we're going along, and I really want to support the continuation of that. And I think the idea of reframing the Brinkerhoff district as a historic district so we could get some of the nuts and bolts worked out and all this is really, really good. And I think the timing for that really, really is now. And this is coming from my budgetary concern, and that the timing for the historic element is probably just in all practicality a little bit longer term issue. So that's my pitch on that. What you would do, though, again, the pieces, we have the existing conservation element, we have that the section to date that I've handed out. We have the EIR forthcoming that carefully analyzes city policies for archaeological, historic, and other heritage resources. So we're building a body of information. We have the public input. The CPA put together this document for a draft general plan, and actually, again, they reviewed the conservation element, and this citizens group proposed strategies, some of which we did put directly into here already. So with these pieces and the EIR, having a work in progress, in early preparation of a draft document, I think doesn't require a whole lot of city staff support. And if you all want to be at the helm of that, I think that makes complete sense. And so that's how I see that effort right now. And again, we haven't divorced yet this community design component, and so it just kind of needs to just not be forgotten, but maybe floating alongside the thoughts in terms of what this resource element would be and what maybe the land use element, how the land use element could possibly incorporate community design as well. So that's the city planner's perspective on things, and I would appreciate hearing back, does this make sense? Do you have questions?
Thank you.
Pleasure of the commission at this point.
Are there any questions?
Yes, I have a question. Betty, you mentioned that, and correct me if I'm wrong in my interpretation of what I heard from you, and in the Planning Commission.
Mm-hmm.
You said that right now you felt that what really needs to be done first is the housing element and the land use element. And the preservation element, and of course, that is the part that people have been talking about forever, which in existing is conservation element. You said, while that's going on, go ahead and work on that, the way, shaping it the way it is. And that's why we felt that that was so important to put it as an immediate goal for our subcommittee meeting. And I guess I wasn't quite clear on why you felt it was so necessary that the land use and the housing element be done first before the preservation element. And if you would clarify that, maybe I would be helpful.
Sure. I do want to let you know that I think that this is not Betty Weiss's plan. This is really the City Council's policy direction. And that there are two big reasons why the land use element and the housing element are being updated at this time. One is the sunset of Charter Section 1508, which was Measure E, was the last general plan update, was a 20-year plan. And it has its focus on non-residential growth, how you get the development plans and the community priorities, and that whole program was established 20 years ago. And it was intended that we do an evaluation. We did an evaluation along the way with the Measure E and the general plan update, and we got to a point, probably in 2001 or something, where we had some discussions with the Planning Commission and the City Council evaluating how successful was that and where do we want to move forward. So their policy direction to us, and that's the big us, you, me, Planning Commission, is we want to do an update of our growth management program. So it actually started as an idea of, well, we're just renewing Measure E in some way, okay? So there's a story involved here. The next thing that happens is the state mandates that we update our housing element every so often, approximately 7 years now. And really, in planning, land use and housing policy go very well together, so we thought that that was beneficial, that we would be updating our growth management ordinance and programs and the housing element. The Planning Commission said, no, you're not just doing a renewal of Measure E. We want an update of the land use element and the land use map. The way that the land use element was updated in the Measure E program is, if you read the back section here, pages, which you should, it's a really good description, again, of the history of planning and particularly this growth management Measure E. It's tacked in on page 65, and it has a description of what the community went through. It has goals, policies, and implementation measures. The rest of this document doesn't function that way. You won't find goals, policies, and implementation measures. And again, this history is really rich, but it's buried in the land use elements, not like in the general. So Planning Commission, being planners, people have worked in this community and other communities and, go to Planning Commission institutes. They're like, no, we really need to update the land use element along and even before the housing element. Talk about priority. The Planning Commission felt very strongly. And we said, well, together. It makes sense to do it together. So I really want you to understand my telling of the story is really a result of a lot of policy direction from both the City Council and the Planning Commission. So, again, but I think the Plan Santa Barbara process has been very open to community dialogue and interest on many, many different fronts. Community health and how community design and planning work affects the health of our community. That was a really new concept that's not in our old general plan anywhere. We had a really great speaker. I don't know if any of you came and saw Dr. Jackson.
Yeah, I saw.
That was part of the Plan Santa Barbara process that really makes you think about the walkability of our community, access to enjoyable public open spaces, just a lot of different things that affects our community health. And so anyway, this is how we have come to be here with your interest, I think, being expressed and supported by the council. Again, the council wants a historic resources element. I'm very clear about that. And I'm sure that they want, as I'm suggesting too, you all to be at the helm of that. So it's just a matter of when and how and, continuing to work on it. So I think we just kind of need to be loose with it, know that these big things are still coming through the Plan Santa Barbara process that I think will inform the ultimate historic element as well. You've got a lot of important work on your plate, just how do you keep it all above board and moving forward.
Are there any other questions?
Oh, Jake?
I was going to say we're also going to be working on our MEA document, which needs updating, pretty drastically. Me and Jaime are looking at different alternatives to how to take the criteria and tighten them up so that it's easier to determine the difference, say, between a landmark and structure of merit. And the photo documentation, I had a suggestion I read past one of your subcommittees regarding how to have different tiers. So there are things we're going to be doing that are like sideline to this, but very important also. Because we're also looking at the idea of, currently we've been focusing on trying to pick individual little buildings and designate. Well, maybe we need to be looking at a neighborhood, And so there's things that are out there that are going to be working hand in hand with what's going on here. That we're not stagnant, even though
Right.
this is
No, I
taking some
understand
time.
Can I get to what I thought you were saying, and that is if we were to push on making Brinkerhoff a historic district. Is there actually a role for us, or is that primarily use of staff time?
We've now got, very strong positive support in Brinkerhoff with the new project that's going on. That they're getting their new lighting put in, and so that there's a renewed interest in districting. The reason I'd really like to do Brinkerhoff first is that we've already got an established neighborhood. We've got support, and it really when they made it a landmark district, it was the quickest way they had at the time they did it. Make everything a structure of merit. We'll call it a landmark district. Okay, and put it on the back burner. Well, now we need to take that and, similar to the guidelines that I wrote for the Lower Riviera Special Design District, create a set of guidelines specific to Brinkerhoff. And when I did those guidelines for the Lower Riviera Special Design District, I did them in modules, so that as these new neighborhoods came in, we could interject the parts that we need from each module and hopefully speed up the process. And so Brinkerhoff will be really our first good test example. And like I said, having the support, having the architecture there. And just in the 10 years that I've been living here, Brinkerhoff has really been turning around and moving back in a positive direction. People are taking the buildings and restoring and renovating and getting rid of the parking lots in the front yards. And so it's really a good place to start. And I think that we'll be able to do that within a much shorter period of time than, say, starting with the West Beach District.
So it is primarily a staff effort, and
Well, I do think that there's a few important roles and responsibilities for the HLC. Having a working subcommittee, so as we're making progress, we can have more informal meetings and all of that. So you're.
Yeah, we have a designation subcommittee.
Oh, but is that the working subcommittee that we're talking about?
It could morph. The designation subcommittee could morph into that. Your EPV guideline subcommittee. However you frame it, that's definitely, I think, critical to help moving a project like that along. And then, of course, you'll be holding hearings and making recommendations to the council to formalize the district. So, where we would invite all the property owners and the public at large to come and talk about this district.
And we started creating a priority of not just landmarks but districts. With the committee, we had some suggestions to, like, for instance, Rosemary Lane is ripe for becoming a district, and so sometimes it's good to strike while the iron's hot, and there's a lot of neighborhood interest in doing it.
All right. So I see that as a task action sort of orientation for at least something concrete that can be done.
I asked Jaime if he wanted this discussion item to be this and the goals. Last time it was the goals, and I kind of tacked this on. And then his feeling was, I think he wanted to get back together with the goals subcommittee, and then bring it back to the full commission as well. So I think in your subcommittee you can take this in consideration, as well as what we're hoping to do in Brinkerhoff and all of that, and prioritize appropriately. And then I want to thank Fermina. She did come to the joint meeting.
She did.
And
I was very well enlightened. Thank you very much. I really followed what was going on in the presentation.
And I haven't figured out what and how we're going to be different starting July 1st next fiscal year. But I think we've settled into who we are and our level of resources for the remainder of this fiscal year. And that does include still having the sign committee run with the zoning program. And in some respects, that lightened Jaime's load, just in terms of keeping in touch with another board and commission and running through that work. That might change again, July 1st. Also, the project planner position, Heather Baker, has been reduced this year for the design review program. She's about only half of the design review program now. And she's just completed, or she's working on some of her design review program. She's really going to start to spend a lot of time in public works shortly. We have Jake and the planning techs that support the boards and commissions, and I think today was quite a full day, but a a little period ago, you canceled a meeting. So I know that Jaime and his team, working with all of you, again, seize the moment. I think we've got a good opportunity to move forward on some of the goals for the remainder of this fiscal year. And then I'm going to be asking for your support and help and what would be different starting July 1st. I have yet to schedule that meeting. I feel like when I come to that meeting, I should have some ideas, good, bad, whatever, and I've just blocked on the ideas, and I think that's going to be a very challenging meeting because I think people feel very strongly about the work that we all do, and seeing it a different way is going to be that was one of the main discussion points at the joint meeting, and I left going, okay, so we've got this big challenge, you know.
And now what?
Yeah.
Maybe the economy will do great things in the first part of the year.
Right, and it is. There's optimism, and there are some indicators, and I know that we don't want to do radical things, you know, only to be bouncing back and forth and things like that. But it's still an important discussion to have. So I'll be back for that to solicit your participation in that as well.
All right. Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Thank you very much,
Okay,
Betty.
thank you. Thanks.
Always very coherent, clear, and thorough.
Your turn.